let's make an amazing black and white portrait Lightroom preset. Along the way, I'm gonna walk you through an advanced 7-step black and white conversion workflow for your portrait images. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. What's up, friends? My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. It's wonderful being here with y'all. So look, not so long ago, I actually made another black and white video. It was an advanced 7-step workflow for landscapes, and some of you actually asked for me to apply this to portraits. So this is me, back here, doing as y'all requested. And this would be a great time. We're gonna get straight into this. Load up Lightroom, go ahead and click the description below to find the download link for the exercise file. We're gonna be working on this image, which you see here. So for our base image, what we have is a shot that is kind of already really nice and sort of timeless. These are the types of images that I love taking to black and white, images that have this story and this emotion present. I feel like they do so well with this look. Let's go ahead and do this. You have the image loaded up. What I want to do is click reset first so you can see everything is reset out. I'm going to press V so we get a baseline black and white conversion, and it already looks actually pretty decent. But let's press Control apostrophe or Command apostrophe to create a virtual copy. Now from here, we're going to start with the workflow. So if you guys remember, step 1 was actually to begin with color and to set your white balance and temperature to a good neutral point, right? I'll explain why in just a moment if you don't remember from the last video, but you should check it out because we apply it to landscapes. Kind of cool. So first thing, I'm going to press W to get my white balance selector, and I'm going to select the wall behind them, which should be pretty close to neutral. And you see immediately that the tint gets bumped up because we had a bit of green tinting coming through the windows, right? I'm going to go ahead and just adjust the temperature up a little as well, so we get to a spot right about here where the skin tones look nice and natural. Step 2 was to exaggerate those colors. And the reason why, which you'll see in just a moment, is we're going to have extra control over those colors with the HSL. But first we need to reveal them before we flip into black and white. And if we flip in now, you can't see what you're really adjusting. So what I'm going to do is drop down into calibration. I'm actually going to take the red primary up. I'm going to take green primaries up. I'm going to take blues way up. Okay. You can also make adjustments if you want to kind of shift tones, but the hues aren't going to matter too much because we're going to be going to black and white anyway. So it'll be a very, very subtle change. What we're really trying to do here is just bring the color out. So now when we go into black and white, we can use the black and white mix to better control those colors. Okay, step 3, let's go ahead and convert to black and white and lower exposure. So press V, and then you're going to lower exposure a bit. Why do I like to lower the exposure? Well, I like to actually use the base tones to reveal detail, and that's step 4. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go into the highlights, and I'm going to reduce highlights a little. I'm going to pull the whites down quite a bit. And if you want, you can kind of play back and forth here. I might actually reduce the highlights a little more and leave the whites up a little brighter, like somewhere around there. Now I'm going to actually use my shadows to reveal shadow detail in the image, okay? And I'm going to use the blacks to also reveal some of the black details. And don't worry if it kind of flattens out, because in a moment we're going to do some tone curve work, okay? Our base tones are now set to kind of reveal detail. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to dial in a tone curve. Some of this is going to be, well, a lot of this is going to be very subjective. You kind of choose what it is that looks good to you, right? What I'm going to do right now in my tone curve is I'm actually going to pull up on the mid-tone highlights, pull down a bit on the shadows, and then right here, check this out. I'm actually going to pull up on the bottom. What this is going to do is we're raising the shadow clipping. So anything that drops below this point is going to go to a dark gray. I'm going to do the same thing up here. Anything that goes above this point goes to a light gray. Okay. So we kind of remove pure whites and pure blacks, and it gives the image a little bit more of a matte feel, which I love for a more timeless aesthetic. And I'm going to show you how to stylize that a bit more later. But for right now, we could do a lot more fine tuning of the tone curve, but for right now, we're good. Let's go on to the next step, which is our black and white mix. So step 6 would have normally been HSL, but now that we're in a black and white, well, step 6 is HSL, but in a black and white, it is the black and white mixer, right? What I want to do in terms of a portrait this time is I'm actually going to raise skin tones a bit, right? I'm going to raise anything that could potentially be a skin tone. Orange is going to go up to maybe plus 15 to plus 20. And I'm going to start dropping things that are not skin tones. So I'm going to kind of pull down the blues, pull down the purples, the magentas, all these other tones that fall outside of skin tones. The beauty of this is I can now further darken the image a little because skin tones are in the orange. It's mostly in the oranges, a little bit in the yellows, and a little bit in the reds. That's kind of why I'm doing a little bit of adjustment to the reds, mostly the adjustment in the oranges, and a little in the yellows, but really it's going to reside mostly in that orange tone. So this is a nice, and again, dial this into your own taste, right? I'm not going to add any color grading. You could put some color grading on here if you wanted to. You could kind of come to your shadows, maybe add in some teals and stuff if you wanted to have more of a split tone look to it. But I'm going to leave it just nice and standalone. Or maybe what I might do, you know what? Let's save that. Let's save that for later. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is adjust presence and stylize the image. So step 7 is presence and stylize. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to go back up to the presence slider, and I'm going to start adding in things like clarity. If I want to reveal more texture, I could pull that up. If I want to reduce, so usually when it comes to like say wedding portraits, I'm typically going to reduce texture a little, like -5 to -10, because I want it to be a little bit more flattering, right? If it's like a street portrait, then I might go the other way with it because I want to increase detail. Okay, and I'm also going to add a little dehaze to the image too. So we're going to go here. This is where if you want to start adding in a bit of contrast, you can. Again, I usually like to go back to the tone curve and make adjustments here first and make all of my fine-tuning adjustments before I start going and playing around with contrast, because I want to save this as a preset, right? And for a preset, I generally like to leave exposure and contrast both zeroed out because those are things that really should go on an image-to-image basis. But for this preset, we're kind of going with this a slightly darker exposure so we can get everything in because the baseline image was a bit bright. I mean, not that bright, but the look of the preset is a little darker. Okay. This is looking pretty good. What else can we do in terms of stylizing? Well, the next thing that I kind of like to do in stylizing is adding a bit more detail so I can actually go and increase, my sharpening. I can add a little bit more in terms of radius, and that's great. Sometimes I'll also add a little bit of noise reduction, again, just to minusing out a little bit of texture and minusing out a little bit of, adding a little bit of noise reduction, and then sharpening, kind of smooth skin, but then increases detail, and it has a nice flattering, sharpening look to the image. The other thing I kind of like to do is I'll actually go into my lens corrections, or you can go into post-crop vignette and add a bit more of a vignette. So it's not going to be much. It's going to be like maybe -5. I'm going to pull the midpoint in. I'm going to make it very round, and I'm going to feather all the way up. So it's just this very subtle dropping of kind of burning to get us to focus in on the center of the image. And other things that you can do to stylize is, say, add a bit of grain to the image, right? I kind of like the look. Again, if you're going to start adding grain, there's not really a point in doing noise reduction. So just keep in mind that if you want to put grain into it, I would take away the texture and the kind of adjustments that you made and do grain. Which, for this particular image, I think I do want a little bit of grain. I like this kind of subtle, timeless black and white sort of vibe with a bit of grain in there. Okay, that's it for the baseline preset. So now all you're going to do to save this out is go up here, go create preset. And what I usually like to do is just press check all and then deselect things like white balance, exposure. You could keep contrast because it zeroes out, but white balance and exposure, I want those to be on an image to image basis, right? Lens correction is totally up to you if you want to keep or remove, but you can take off transform. We're going to leave the effects on, noise, everything else is going to stay. Lens correction can stay too. And then you're going to go ahead and create that as a preset. So now you have it. Okay, lastly, when you apply the preset, then you're basically going to go straight to the next step, which is just to add local adjustments. And usually what I like to do for this is a bonus kind of 8th step, right? What I like to do here is kind of add another radial filter in to sort of pull attention right into my subjects. Okay, I'm going to brighten a little, and then I'm going to go and do a little bit of like detail enhancing. So what I kind of want to do here, you could do several different things, okay? So one, you could actually do detail enhancing, like, adding contrast, boosting highlights and that kind of stuff. But it is going to have a sort of unflattering effect on skin. So notice what this is doing. It's kind of increasing texture and clarity and all that kind of stuff. So while it's cool, for a wedding photo, it might be a bit too much. So instead, what I'm going to do, and this is part of the Visual Flow retouching toolkit, but you can dial in the exact settings. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do, and then you can dial in the settings. I'm going to go to Dodge Highlights, okay? Now, notice what the settings are. Exposure, highlights, shadows, whites are being pulled down. Basically, what it's going to do is just dodge highlights. And if I feel like it's affecting highlights too much, I really want this to go to whites, and that's where I want it to be. I want it to be in the highlights of the skin and just kind of revealing, all the highlights, not only on the dress, but on their faces and everything. I'm going to go to the hand as well and get this in on this side too. Now, of course, we need to refine that mask a little bit, but the first thing that I want to do is actually dial it back. So hold down Alt or Option, click and drag, and just pull the setting back. Again, if you're not using Visual Flow Retouching Toolkit, you're just going to dial in the settings, right? Dial in the settings. But the nice thing is that these are added and created based on strength. So when you pull left and right, it'll literally reduce the strength of the effect. But we're going to land at around +10 on highlights, +46 on whites. The last thing you can do as well is turn on the range mask to luminance and tell Lightroom, well, I don't want to affect anything that's a shadow, so I'm going to bring it to about right here. I also don't want to affect anything that's a really bright highlight, so I'm going to bring it to about right here. And I'm also going to smooth it. Now we get a very subtle transition, and this is where I would start going in and saying, okay, now it's ready to refine a little. If I press O to bring up the mask, I can kind of pull it off certain areas that I don't want it to appear. And just, maybe I'll pull it off the, background so we don't get any type of, weird transitions or anything. It's starting to look really nice. And you can kind of pull this back a little bit more too if you want to adjust this down further. But this looks absolutely awesome, in my opinion. So if I were to compare that to the standard black and white conversion, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So there's the before, here's the after. Most of that 7-step advanced workflow, you're going to save out into your preset, which just means all you got to do from that point on is just apply it, go ahead and do a local adjustment, and you're good to go. One little last tweak that I'm going to do before I close this out is I am going to reduce some of the effect down here on the hands, just to kind of allow the faces to kind of shine through a bit more. And you know what, this hand doesn't even need really anything. So let's kind of let the faces kind of shine through a little bit more, and I could even bring now the overall image down a little bit and kind of keep it right there. But I love that look. Look at the difference between these two. It's such a crazy dramatic difference using that same 7-step workflow for advanced black and white conversions, but this time for portrait images, we get to this spot. I hope you guys dig it. Make whatever tweaks and modifications your heart sees fit. This is your black and white conversion, but hopefully the workflow helps out. If you guys enjoyed, you can help me and the Adorama TV creators out by liking the video, subscribing to the channel. We upload new content every single day, so turn on notifications if you guys want to be notified. In the meantime, this video was inspired by each of you and your comments, so I'd love for you to comment below because I actually read them and I get ideas from them. If you want to learn, like, hey, it'd be cool to see that black and white conversion applied to portraits, well, comment so I know exactly what it is. In the meantime, you guys can follow me at PieJersa on Instagram, and that's it for me. I'll see you all next video. Peace.